On today's show, Houston Rockets free agency preview with a focus on the available wing players in free agency for the Houston Rockets. Who are the best available wings on the market? Who fits Houston's needs the most? We're going to break down names like Dillon Brooks, Cam Johnson, Khris Middleton, Grant Williams, Harrison Barnes, all these guys coming up on today's episode of Locked on Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked on NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin. And the show, of course, at Locked on Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give us your thoughts in the comments section of who you want to see the Rockets sign for the wing spot on the roster. Let us know in the YouTube comments. We're going to go through 5 names on today's show. I want your thoughts on who your favorite of all these possible candidates are. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked on Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, Frank, from the Rockets Chop Shop. You can track down on Twitter at FTank58 as well as at HTX Chop Shop. Be sure to follow along on Twitter and on YouTube, where they post all of their incredible Rockets content. And Frank, we are 3 days away from Rockets free agency. Well, free agency for the entire NBA, but for the Rockets specifically, we don't care about those other teams out there. Unless they impede upon what the Rockets are trying to do. Are you excited for free agency right around the corner with about $60 million for the Rockets to spend?
Yeah, I mean, it's free agency is probably the most, aside from the draft, I would say it's probably one of the best times to be an NBA fan, especially on social media, because like we were just joking off air, even though it's on Friday, 1 minute before it's actually free agency kicks in, you're going to see Shams and Woj auto-tweeting like 1,000, I guess they have some like way to get these agents and to sign within the minute of the hour. But, I'm ready. It's fun. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I just feel it in my bones. I think the Rockets probably already signed some good deals, so I'm hoping. So fingers crossed. Right.
Hopefully the Rockets have lined up their deals. We're going to navigate through on today's show some of the available wings this free agency, the names that are going to be linked to the Rockets and who we ultimately think they're going to wind up settling with. Maybe not settling. Settling feels like such a negative connotation. Who they wind up walking away
well, some
with.
Some of them may be settling. There's some names that we've thrown out there, and we're probably going to talk about that. Maybe a settle, but I'll diverge.
All right, let's start with we're going to navigate through the available free agent wings, and there have been a few that have been so strongly linked to the Houston Rockets. Let's start with this first one though, because I feel like it's more so want to just tackle him. Let's get him out of the way almost. Khris Middleton, who felt like almost, I don't know, he felt like almost a pipe dream for a while, where it was like, okay, well, maybe the Rockets are going to go sign James Harden, and then Khris Middleton is like the B-tier superstar that you try to, or superstar is not even the right word here, B-tier star that you try to pair with a James Harden. I think there's some merit to the idea of bringing Khris Middleton in, but he strikes me as the guy who's probably going to get paid the most out of all the available free agent wings this offseason. And to me, I just don't know if he addresses the shooting need for the Rockets. I don't know if he addresses much else, and there are legitimate concerns about his health at this point in his career.
I think what you just said is probably the main point of why he's not at the top of my list. I wouldn't be mad at Khris Middleton being on the Rockets, but if you think about what Coach Udoka and Rafael Stone have talked about, they wanted for the needs for the team, it's defense, shooting, and just giving us a different look at different positions. And I think when you're looking at these free agents, like I try to get guys that are going to do multiple things at once. So if it's a guy that could play as a two-way guy, so he's going to help on offense and defense. If it's a guy that could play make and play defense, is it a guy that could play make and shoot? Just looking at those things, a guy that could defend and shoot. Those are the kind of the overlaps that I want. When you think about a Middleton, he's a isolation scorer. He's not a great facilitator, and he's pretty much played off of Giannis his whole career. So I don't want to be the team that experiments to see what he looks like as the guy. And I don't know if he has that in his bag to be one of the guys that you can say, I'm going to give him north of $40 million to be on our team that is oversaturated at the wing position. It's, the shooting, like you said, is a great premium, but he's a better mid-range shooter than anything. And that's really where a lot of his game lies. So when you think about the athletes that we have and the type of offense that Coach Udoka likely wants to run, given some of the history on the other teams it's on, is generating paint touches and kicking out to shooters on their perimeter. I just don't feel like we're maximizing a $40+ million player by getting a guy that's going to be, hitting, just catch and shoot threes and attacking closeout. So I just feel like we could probably do more at other positions, like you pointed out.
And the other weird part, right, is the Rockets are so stacked currently on the wing. When you just look at the really, I'm setting aside Jae'Sean, Tate, and KJ Martin for a minute, right? And KJ Martin, had a lot of success this past season. I'm not exactly sure what his future is ultimately going to look like in Houston, because he's probably due for the bag right around the corner, right? He's heading into the final year of his rookie deal. The Rockets may feel like they need to trade him before they have to pay him, honestly, at the end of the day. And he's probably one of the few pieces on this roster that has a lot of positive value in trade talks around the league. You look at this team, you look at Tari Eason, Jabari Smith Jr., now Cam Whitmore. You've still got KJ Martin, Jae'Sean Tate, whoever the Rockets ultimately bring in at the wing, which I feel pretty strongly that they're going to try to bring somebody in at the wing. It has to be somebody that you feel confident in, paying whatever you're going to pay them, which, like you said, for Middleton, he's probably at a minimum going to make somewhere 35, 40 million plus a year, right? It's almost borderline James Harden money that we're talking, but for a complete, a complete notch below type player. And then two, whoever you commit this money to on the wing, you're going to have to be comfortable with that player starting ahead of and eating up a chunk of minutes ahead of a lot of these other young players on the roster. And I think that's the important thing, whether it's the wing spot, the guard spot, the big spot, whoever you're committing this money to, you need to be confident in, hey, this player needs to give us a look that these other guys aren't currently giving us, and needs to be somebody that really pushes us forward rather than just gives us one specific skill set, right? Like a very niche type of skill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think that's the line and the balance that Stone and Udoka and the front office have to try to balance, is bringing in players that help you win in the short term, but also keeping in mind the long-term development of these guys that we've invested so many assets in and time and resources into these young players. So you don't want to bring in players that ultimately just take away from the development of your players, because what they've said is they want short contracts. That came out that a lot of the contracts they're pushing for are between the 2 and 3 year range. That assumes that 3 years from now, you're going to be relying on Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore to really carry you along in this becoming a contender. And if you're getting guys that are going to come in, start, play 35, 40 minutes, take away reps, and not saying that the rookies or the young guys have to start, but take away meaningful reps and development from them by being overly redundant, then when you get to that point, basically you have a bunch of role players on your team. And so that's going to be tricky to trying to figure out who are you bringing in that's going to be able to thread that needle. That's why you hear people are really high on the kind of the guys that are more on the peripheries rather than the big name stars like the Hardens and the Middletons and these kind of mega stars of that are out there in the NBA.
Coming up, we're going to get to some of those other wing names available on the market, the Dillon Brooks, the Cam Johnsons, the Harrison Barnes of the world. We're going to get there in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head on over to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage section and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball with Frank from the Rockets Chop Shop. Now, Frank, one of these other names that I feel like Rockets fans kind of fell in love with very early on in the, I guess, free agency process, kind of looking forwards to the free agency marketplace, all that. It's Cam Johnson. Right, he's a guy that got traded to, landed with the Brooklyn Nets. He's hitting restricted free agency, and he is absolutely a guy that I think checks multiple boxes when you're the Houston Rockets, a guy that could address shooting. He gives you some size. He gives you not a, insane great defender. He's not going to be like an all NBA caliber defensive type guy, but he's a good above average defender, I feel like. And I think when you look at his ultimate fit on this Rockets team versus what he would ultimately probably cost to pry him away from the Brooklyn Nets, you're looking at something like probably, $25 million a year average annual value, give or take. The real question I think with him is ultimately going to be the Rockets, like you said already, right? They're prioritizing short-term deals, 2, maybe 3-year deals max. I think Cam Johnson's young enough, and he's the type of guy that's going to command probably a 4-year deal from any team that's ultimately trying to procure his services. And it just kind of depends. Can the Rockets overpay enough on a short-term deal, like a 2 or 3-year deal, to pry him away from a team that would be offering him like a full-blown 4-year, $100 million type deal?
Yeah, it's going to come down to money for him. And that's what the advantage that the Rockets have. With the most cap space in the NBA, we're going to have to overpay. That's the weapon we can use to try to get guys. And I love Cam Johnson because of all the things you just named. There are a few players that are out there that you can give extended contracts to because they're not, they fit within the window of what we're trying to do. And maybe that, 25, some people I've heard 30. I don't know if they go up that far. $1 million contract may not be so bad in the new CBA in 2025, when he's a player that's, still producing at a high level during that time. The great thing I love about him, I've seen him play in Phoenix as a role player that's come off the bench. He started some over there as well. And he fit his role, played it to its T. Then when he got to Brooklyn, was given more opportunities to play and contribute more to the team. And he elevated his game to reach the need for that team. And I love when I see that from players. I call that the James Harden model. Now, you guys know I always talk about James Harden negatively, but let's not get it twisted. The dude is cold. And if you look at one of the reasons I know, and random James Harden tangent, one of the reasons that that I'm sure that Morey knew James Harden was great was when you look at James Harden's efficiency numbers at OKC, the more he played, the better he got. And to me, that's a marker that I look at for role players that I think can scale up to be better than what they are.
It's scalability, right? Somebody who can you can play 15 minutes a night, or you can play 35, and your numbers are going to increase with the increased burn, right?
Yeah, and you guys like Tyrese and fit into that model. Not on great sample size, but things like that just tell you a player can be special. I think Cam still has room to grow in his game. I think there's a lot he can still add and be able to grow with this. And he is probably, I don't know, I've heard different perspectives of where he could go. I think the Rockets just have to, if they really, really want him, it's going to come down to a money play. And just say that we're going to outbid everybody and go for it. I don't know how they really feel about him to that level. Like, are they willing to go into a $30 million a year contract for him? But I think he's the goods. I really value what he brings to the team. And I think he brings a skill set with his size and the things he does all around that we don't have in any one player at this certain moment right now.
And he's definitely more. I've seen some people try to, chalk up his game to just, he's just a shooter. I think there's a difference between being a shooter and being a scorer, right? Like Cam is a scorer. He's somebody that I think his role with the Suns was more or less, spot up, hit your shots, when you're open, that kind of thing. But then, like you said, with the Nets, his role has kind of evolved a little bit more to where he's been, asked or tasked with doing a little bit more offensively. And you see more of that bag from him, right? You see him able to put the ball on the deck a little bit, create a little bit, get to the rim and attack. He can score in a variety of ways. He's not just a one-dimensional catch and shoot. That's all he's going to provide for you offensively. And I fully agree. I think he would be a big fit for this Houston Rockets team. The question is, like you said, it comes down to money. What's the most you'd be willing to commit to Cam Johnson?
Probably 30 million. I think 120.
4 years or 3 years?
Yeah, 4 years, 120. And I think that's a good value deal that you can get for him. And, he's always going to be a positive asset on your books, no matter what happens. With his skill set, his size, he's always going to be, even if it doesn't work out, particularly in Houston, you can always pivot for it. And I do consider that when thinking about these contracts. You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you want to make a move, you see a guy that you like on the open market, whether via trade or in free agency, and you can't move because the players you have negative value to the rest of the league. So I think he checks all the boxes. I would love, and man, if we were able to get him, let's say this Friday and comes out that that's the, one of the guys we get, I think just keeps along with the theme of the Rockets hitting the offseason out the park with the draft and now free agency and obviously hiring Coach Udoka.
How do you feel about Harrison Barnes? Because I'm torn on him. I think that he would be a really interesting addition, but I also view Barnes as kind of the same as Jabari, right? Where they're a bit more in that jumbo wing kind of thing. And I feel like the Rockets need a good point of attack kind of primary defensive ace at that wing spot, somebody that they can really task with, hey, all right, that's the other team's best player. You're going to go check them all night, right? And I don't think Barnes is that kind of guy. I think he's that weird 3-4-5 tweener, kind of like Jabari is. Better offensive skill set right now, but that's kind of the archetype of player, right?
I love Barnes, but he's on the flip side of the Cam Johnson because he's an older player. So that means shorter contract. And I'm okay with that because I think, as I was saying earlier, some of those players that you want to bring in, I think he's the type of guy that you could bring him in. He plays 20-something minutes, and maybe you do overpay him for 2 years to be here to lend some of his experience. You got to remember Harrison is at heart, he's a warrior. He's a guy that's been in Golden State, won championships over there, sat through the rebuild with the Kings and Fox and all of them coming to age to the point where they finally made the playoffs. So he's been on both sides of the coin. And I think him coming to Houston, he can lend so much veteran experience. He's one of those guys you're going to pay for his experience and his knowledge and just the demeanor. He's a great locker room guy by all accounts. I still think like guys like that, if you miss out on the Cam Johnsons and some of the other more impact on the court players, then use that money, what I call the kick the can down the road, just for a year or two and just, give it to a vet that's going to help, Jabari and Tari and some of these guys learn how to be professionals, Cam Whitmore and some of these young players that we've drafted. So I think there's still value in that. I mean, honestly, it's really hard for the Rockets to mess up in this free agency because we're starting so low. With expectations from the bottom, there's only one way is to go up, baby. The bar is in
hell, man. The bar is in hell for the Rockets. It's so low. They can clear the bar. Who has the least amount of hops that you can think of in the NBA? Because that guy can still clear the bar. That's how low it is for the Rockets. Is it Boban?
Yeah, they can. They got to be Boban. They got to be. I've seen him just walk into a dunk, but they could literally sign. I mean, there's a few guys. I think most of the things they could do is just have bad contracts, but anybody is an upgrade. And I think we've lacked so much as a team, whether it's the veteran leadership that's structured there, the coaching structure, just learning for our guys, learning how to be NBA players. I think any of these guys bringing that to the table is an upgrade over what we've had it over the past few years. So yeah, I think that it's, some guys are better. There is a couple players I'm not happy with, that we get, but I think most of them, like Harrison Barnes, I would love him in Houston.
And at the end of the day, right, this position, let me rephrase, the positions that the Rockets are trying to fill with these veteran additions, right? I think the main goal is, we don't know what anybody on this Rockets roster is going to be, right? Like Jalen, Sengun, Jabari, Tari, Cam, Amin, they've all got like this crazy sky high potential and everything, but that's just it. They're all still so incredibly raw. Even Jalen and Sengun, who are going into year 3 of their careers, we really still don't have a clear indication of how good those guys can be. Are they going to be playoff caliber type players one day? We have a lot of signs that point to, yes, they've got a lot of talent. They're going to be really, really good. But I think that's going to be kind of the main thing about what the Rockets try to bring in with these multiple free agent additions is they want to bring in guys with that experience, right? Guys who have been there, who have done that, who have had some success, so that you can point to and you can say, okay, this guy that we've got starting at point guard, or this guy that we've got starting at the wing, or the guy that we've got backing up Alp as a big off the bench, or maybe even some nights starting in front of Alp at the 5 spot or whatever. These guys are all guys who have playoff experience and are bringing that to the table, which then kind of elevates the rest of the roster. I think that's very clearly the goal for this offseason and why they're trying to bring in so many, like, veteran type names.
Yeah. I would say one thing that I remember from the last season is when we traded for Dennis Schroeder. And even though, people made fun of him and he's not like the greatest player in the world, one thing that really I noticed from the team is what he did was, one, they huddled a couple of times when he was there, which is something they've never done prior to that. And just little stuff like that. And it was one of the first times that Kevin and Jalen started making the skip passes on pick and rolls. And that's what Schroeder's really good at doing. And you can see just having, even if the player's not better than them, but just telling them, giving them tips and like how to maybe run a play differently or a read that they might have missed. That stuff goes a long way for these young guys in their development, because a lot of times you're just out there just playing, you miss a lot of things, and having that guy that's been there, done that, helping you out with that, it also accelerates their development, which is one of my criticisms for the team in ignoring that aspect. You can still tank and have done that, and I think we've ignored that, so they need to overcompensate.
Come on, Frank, say the line. I know you want to say it. Come on. You can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, man. It's been, hey, they've been doing so good, man. I done forgot my own catchphrase. They've been doing so good. They're walking, chewing bubble gum, playing music, skipping. I mean, they're doing good. They're doing good. So, yeah, but I think we need to overcompensate on vets and getting that structure. And I think it's going to really show with these guys, the leaps are going to take this coming season.
Coming up, we've got a couple more names on this Rockets free agency wing list that we're going to get to. Grant Williams and Dillon Brooks. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Frank and I were just joking off camera for a second where we're repressing the Steven Silas era memories of this Rockets team. And Frank goes, yeah, it's just, it was the bubble and then it's just now. Like that's just everything else is just a big blank space in the middle of Rockets history.
My brain is self-preservating. It's whatever the word is. Itself right now. All I remember is Russell Westbrook being bullied by LeBron in the bubble, and I just woke up and Amen Thompson, you're a Rocket. So yeah, good times for me right now. So I don't remember anything that's happened over the past few years. I'm good.
It's okay. We're not going to reminisce on the past. We don't have to worry about all that. None of the
lob threat
or
they're not getting after it like they're supposed to.
Oh my God! Trigger. Should give me trigger warnings.
Oh man! All right. On that note, we got a couple more names here on our list. Let's start with Grant Williams, right? A guy who's had a previous connection with Ime Udoka, has played for him before. And, I was always intrigued by the idea of Grant Williams, even when a lot of Rockets fans were getting really caught up in the hype around Cam Johnson as a free agency name. I was thinking, I was looking at like Cam and I was like, okay, yeah, shooting gives you a little bit of size, cool, probably going to cost you a little bit more. But my eyes kept lingering and going over towards Grant Williams, because I really think he could be a really great defensive, versatile fit, right? A guy who can play the 4 or the 3, I think, on any team. I think he gives you whatever you lose offensively with Grant Williams that like a Cam Johnson would give you. I think he makes up for defensively. And I think on the list of wings that we're talking about today, Frank, I think he's easily the second best defender on that entire list.
Yeah, Grant is an interesting player. Obviously Boston is kind of, they went away from him as the year went along, not as much as when Udoka was there. I'm not really sure why. Maybe trying to favor more of getting Malcolm Brogdon integrated into their team. But I think he'd be a great fit here, honestly, because one, he's young.
I'm sorry,
he's one of those
did you say
players.
Malcolm Brogdon?
I think was it like Oregon, one of them deals. Brogdon.
It's like Malcolm
Oregon,
Brogdanovich. Like what are we doing here?
I'm combining players, but So Grant, one thing I've heard about him is that like he's one of those like super passionate, rah-rah type of guys. I love players like that. I think every team needs a couple of those type of players. The shooting is there, the defense is there. I think for a young team like ours, once again, another guy that you can give a 4-year contract to because he's still relatively young. Even though he looks like he's 30, he's only like 23 or 24 years old. So, I think, he would be somebody. I'm wondering what his price point is. I think earlier in the season, I've heard that his camp was talking about something in the 20s, which is, perfectly fine, especially for us. I'm just wondering what other teams and what are his goals. I've heard teams for him floated around like Dallas would be a team to consider for him to be able to go over there and play with Luka. I see him as somebody that probably wants to win. Even though he's young, I still think he probably wants to be on a contender once he's gotten that taste of going to the finals and things like that. So I think unless, once again, we try to pay out more than the market does, he might be a hard get unless Ime has some connection to him that we don't know about. But I think, once again, can't go wrong with a guy that's been in the finals and been a contributor.
Yeah, there's that significant loser tax that you wind up having to pay unless, again, you've got a guy like, on this list of guys that we've talked about, right? Harrison Barnes is a guy he's done his winning, he's done his losing, he's done his time rebuilding. He's kind of been on both sides of the fence there. So he's a guy that maybe you wouldn't have to pay as much on, say, the loser tax because maybe he's not as hell-bent on being on a winner moving forward, right? Because he's already done some winning in his career, that kind of thing. Those are the types of players that you might be able to get, I won't say on the cheap, but that might not be as impacted by that loser tax. Whereas, like you said, a guy like Grant Williams, who, just is fresh off of a finals trip, had some success with the Celtics. Obviously, they fell to the Miami Heat just now in the conference finals, but has been playing some high-level basketball, right? Is he willing to give up all of that to come to a Rockets team that is probably still a few years away at a minimum from getting back to that level of basketball play? That's a tough pill to swallow unless you're getting $25 million a year along with it. I think it's probably going to be somewhere in, like, if I had to guess, I think his market value is somewhere like 17 to 22 is probably my ballpark range for him. I think he gets a contract somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, but I think we're in a weird dynamic right now too because usually teams like us don't really go after big name free agents. Like at this early point in the development of the team, usually you want to get like the end of the bench type of vets to come in and keep supporting your guys. But it's just a rare situation where you have this cap space. That's why it's okay if they can get some like a bigger name on a shorter contract. And I think that, it gives you a lot of flexibility that you have, that you want to be able to use in the event that maybe Jalen Green is a superstar, maybe Alperen Sengun is a superstar. So you're not hamstrung in trying to construct a team to support what you have. So it's the cap space is a huge weapon. To me, it's a very underrated aspect of rebuilding teams. And you can see Washington, all their moves they're making right now for the Wizards are driven by keeping their cap flexibility in the future. And with this new CBA, things are going to be different. The landscape of the NBA is changing. I think what people have to stop doing is thinking about how things used to be with contracts, with picks. This is going to be the era of the second round picks. If you didn't see that last year already, it's going to be something that's happening now for contenders using that as their trade baits and things like that. So it's a new frontier. And I think that we can really shape our future in this summer. That's why it's so important that they really get a smart contract and a guy that's going to give you value now, but also give your young guys future value and help them grow when they're ready to take on the mantle of being the stars of the team.
All right, last name that we've got out of our list of 5 wing players here today, and I'm going to say I saved the best for last jokingly here because I know, I get Frank's already making a face. Dillon Brooks, who is a very polarizing figure amongst Rockets fans. And I say polarizing, I feel like the vast majority of Rockets fans are actually very anti-Dillon Brooks at this point. I've started to warm up to the idea, but I will save my talking points. Give us your immediate reaction, Frank. How do you feel about potentially adding Dillon Brooks to this team?
Okay, so I'm not like in a vacuum. Once again, we did this with Kyrie Irving. It's almost the opposite for Dillon Brooks because in a vacuum, I don't like him as a player, but on a team construct, I can see what he actually does. he's a great defender. I think that's what he brings. He does address that need for defense. My concern with him is his mentals, right? And what I mean by that is not that like he's like crazy or doing stuff or bringing guns to clubs or anything like that. Off the court, pretty quiet player. But, you know, obviously the talking, I really don't care about all that. My thing is like shot selection and in-game IQ. And that's where I think anybody that we need to add, we have enough bad IQ guys on the team already. I need us to get add extra in that other side of high IQ players. Not saying he's like a bad, like he's, a bad basketball player. The shot selection is terrible. And, I was looking at his numbers in prep for this, just looking at his on-off stats during the regular season, pretty much net neutral, only like a +1 when he's on the court compared to when he's off. When they got in the playoffs, he was a -15 for the Memphis Grizzlies. So he was destroying them. You could argue he might have single-handedly got them kicked out the playoffs with his play because he was just all over the place. And he doesn't have that composure that I think that we need to import into our team that can help our guys see, this is how you do it. What is he going to tell them? Oh, I told Bron I'm going to drop 40 on him, and then I got, bounced out the playoffs. So I get it. If there's somebody, I don't know, I forgot the guy's name. I wish I can give him props right now. He had said that Dillon Brooks contract, if it's around like $13.5 million, that's kind of how it would fit on the Rockets. I would do that in a heartbeat because if you look on synergy as a,
was it Kyle? I think it was Kyle.
Yes, it was Kyle. It was Kyle. Every rating he has on defense is very good. Isolation, very good defender. Pick and roll ball handler, very good defender. Spot up, very good defender. Handoffs, very good defender. Like he's a great defender, and I think that's a team need. He can shoot. He had a down year. It's just the decision making. Who's there to check him? We have a very young team. We have Coach Udoka. Maybe that helps, but I don't know. It just feels like it's a bad mix right now to try to bring in a guy that has that type of personality with a bunch of guys that are searching for that leadership right now.
I think. So I agree with the points, right? Like I was very against the idea of Dillon Brooks originally. I have warmed up to it because I think that when you look at what he does bring from a defensive perspective, right, he would immediately be the best defender on the team. And the one thing that I think he brings, right, is he's been a starting level player on a Grizzlies team that has been really, really good the last 3 years, right? Like they've been on the come up. They've had a lot of success the last 3 years. And I know you were citing the on-off numbers specifically from this past season and the playoff run specifically this last postseason where he was, largely a detriment for the Grizzlies. I don't remember the postseason numbers off the top of my head for the previous 2 years, but he was really impactful the last 2 seasons. Like his on-off numbers this year was the most negligible of the 3 most recent seasons where it was like a +1 differential when he was on the court versus off the court. And the Grizzlies were still good even when he was off the court. But the previous 2 years, like he had a noticeable net differential when he was on the court versus when he was off the court. And some of that might just be, okay, it's the Grizzlies. They have a really good team. There's other good players. He plays predominantly with the starters. You can make a lot of different arguments for why he had the numbers that he had. But I do think that he would bring a toughness to the Rockets. He would easily become their best defender. He's a guy that you feel, I think, comfortable slotting into that starting 3 spot. I do think the concerns with him and how he would factor into things offensively are warranted. Maybe this is me putting too much faith in Udoka, Frank, but I feel like Udoka is exactly the type of coach that can check a guy like Dillon Brooks, right? And basically say, look, we want you to excel at this, this, and this. These are the things you're good at. Stay inside your box and don't step out of that box or I'm going to bench you, right? Like the moment you start making dumb, boneheaded plays offensively, the moment you start doing the most or being extra on offense, that's the moment I'm pulling you out of the game and you're going to ride the pine for a minute until you figure yourself out. Because he clearly is very good at what he's good at, right? He's an all defensive caliber player, and adding a guy like that, if you can get him at a decent price point, and here's the thing, right? We've talked about the different contract values for all these different guys. I think if you're going to overpay for somebody, I would hate to overpay for Dillon Brooks. Like, I don't want to give Dillon Brooks a $25 million 4-year contract. That would be awful. But if you can get Dillon Brooks on a cheaper kind of like 2-year deal, maybe it's like 17, 18 million for a couple years, or maybe you overpay slightly for him for those 2 years and you get him on a short-term deal, that's something where I think that you can maybe get away with it and it becomes a better option for the Rockets than some of these other names on the market.
I mean, I agree with everything, especially with the contract. Once again, my only concern with him is the fit as far as personality wise on the team. As we've seen, we've had the dynamic between like Kevin Porter and Jalen kind of taking a backseat to KPJ's personality at times. We're adding other players. I've seen, Dillon Brooks next to John
Brooks come out and say, it's my turn to cook. Get out of here.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's my concern. Like, he's going to come just like he's been next to John Morant, which is probably one of the best guards in the NBA. And there are times where he goes on his I'm him runs in the game and shoots them out of games, because to me, that goes back to the mentality again. I just feel like any player we bring in has to really not only on court have the supplement what our young guys do, but also off court be able to like help them grow and encourage them to do what they do. I feel like Dillon Brooks is still at a point in his career, especially after being disrespected and dismissed by his former team, that he's still going to try to be like, I need to prove that I'm a guy. And I don't know if our group of guys, maybe Amendo's, I don't know, maybe Jabari, I've seen in Jalen is not like a type A personality player. I don't want to see us come out of one era to bring in another guy that's going to take away from basically eat off the food of other people. Now, some people may argue, hey, Jalen, step up, be the guy, grab the bulls by the horns. But I don't know. I just feel like it's a risk that we don't have to take. And I don't think his impact on defense is going to be the reason why the Rockets make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs like right now. But I wouldn't be mad at it if the contract is right. Honestly, I would prefer somebody else if we could.
All right. Before we wrap things up here, Frank, we went through 5 names. Go ahead and give me your list, top to bottom, 1 through 5, of who you'd like to see the Rockets sign this free agency out of the available wings that we went through.
Okay, so Cam Johnson is definitely number 1 on that list.
Okay.
I'm going to go Khris Middleton after him. I'm going to go Barnes. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Who are the last 2?
Grant Williams, Dillon Brooks.
Okay, no, let me reshuffle that. It's going to be Cam Johnson, Grant Williams, Khris Middleton, Harrison Barnes 4th. And then, I'm going to run a mile and drink some water and wait and let the gap keep growing. And then take a nap, wake up, and then we're going to put your boy Brooks over there as somebody I'd like to sign. Once again, I don't dislike him. I just, I'm going
to give you a 6th slot, and you can just leave the 5th slot empty and then put Dillon Brooks at 6, because clearly you are very anti-Dillon Brooks at this point. Man, that's a lot.
I wouldn't be mad. I know people are going to I don't dislike him. I've laid out my reasons. I think that he's not a great fit for what we're moving forward. The Rockets may feel differently.
For
and
sure.
That's okay.
No, for sure. I think if I'm doing my 5, I think I'm in agreement. I've got Cam Johnson at the top of the list. I think he checks the most boxes out of everything that the Rockets would need from that wing spot. So I've got Cam Johnson. I do have Dillon Brooks at 2, though. I've warmed up to the idea of him in comparison to a bunch of the other guys on this list, right?
Over Grant Williams?
I think over Grant Williams. Yeah, I think that Grant is a little bit more Grant's more like the 4-3, and Dillon Brooks is more like the 3/2. Like, he's more the wing, point of attack defender guy. So I think Dillon Brooks 2 for me, then Grant Williams, then Harrison Barnes, and then Middleton actually last for a lot of the reasons that we kind of laid out, right? Middleton is that star player. He's going to command the most money out of that group. Does he really make a lot of sense? Like, he's going to be a guy that's going to take a bulk of shots away from other players. I don't really think this team needs that. They need those role players, those ancillary type pieces to bring in to complement all the other young guys while still kind of steering them in the right direction. But Frank, on that note,
the spot. Real quick, on the spot.
Okay.
I put you on the spot. Who are they picking up? You gotta, you're at Vegas right now. You're putting your money on it. $100,000. Who are they picking up?
I think they're picking up Dillon Brooks. Damn. Yeah, I think he's going to be the guy. I think internally they like what Dillon Brooks can bring to the table. And I think some of the factors are the money, right? Like, I think Cam Johnson's going to command a bigger, longer term contract. And I think they're going to be able to get away with a cheaper, shorter term deal with Dillon Brooks. So I think he's going to be ultimately the guy that they go with.
Okay, well, in that, if they do go with him and he somehow sees this, let me get my little Men in Black scanner thing. Flash it. This conversation never happened, Jackson. Delete this tape.
There we go.
If they signed Dillon Brooks.
You know what? Once we'll air the episode, and then once Friday hits, if they actually sign Dillon Brooks, I'll just come back and just edit out this one little chunk. We'll just hide the episode before he ever lays eyes on it. Okay, Frank?
Yeah, there we go. That'll work for me.
On that note, you know the drill. Let everybody know where they can track you down at, man.
Yeah, on the Rockets Shop, y'all keep supporting us. Thank you guys for keep supporting the channel. We're growing really, really fast, and appreciate all your support, Jackson.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Give us your thoughts on the available reported wing targets for your Houston Rockets in the comment section. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.